Depth of field is another common effect that can be achieved after rendering with the compositor. To accomplish this, we'll use the Z channel, which represents depth information from our 3D scene, and we need to set the distance setting for our 3D camera. So with that selected, we'll go to the camera object data properties, and in the depth of field drop-down, we need to set this distance slider. But first, let's enable limits in the display drop-down, and we can start to drag out this distance value. And you can see that yellow crosshair is where the camera will be in focus. Everything behind and in front of the crosshair will be blurred. So I'm going to set this just at the front of our orb object, like that. And now click render so we store that depth information. With that finished, let's jump back to the node editor, and we need to make room for a defocus node. So let's move the viewer and composite node off to the side a little bit. Hit Shift A, and then in the filter category, we have defocus. And we can plug that in, and we have a Z socket open. But remember that we separated our scene into 3 different render layers. So we need to combine our Z channel into one input. And we can easily do that with the Z combine node that's in our color section. First, we'll take the Z from our backdrop, plug it into the upper Z socket, and then the Z channel from our other objects. Now duplicate our Z combine so that we can add in our last Z channel for the orb. And now that these are combined, we can preview what this information is if we add a vector normalize node. Now this is just for previewing so that the Z channel is not this mysterious type of data, but with this normalize node we can see a translated image of that data. So let's enable the backdrop, and you can see that it's black in the foreground, and as we go backwards it gets white. And this is how the depth of the scene is interpreted. So let's get rid of that normalized node and take the Z output, plug it into the Z socket of our defocus node, and plug that into the viewer. And right away we get blurring, but it doesn't look quite right, because actually the whole image is being blurred at the same rate with no respect to the distance that we set in the depth of field options of our camera. And in order to make this node respect that, we need to enable this use ZBuffer option. And what this means is it's using that depth information from the 3D scene. And from there you'll notice that the Z-scale value down here is grayed out and disabled, while the f-stop value is enabled. And so the value of 128, as we can see in the description, is infinity. It means perfect focus, which I personally think is a little goofy as the default, because even though this is set up properly, I think that something's wrong because I'm not getting any depth of field. Instead, we have to change this value way down to, let's try 10. And now we start to see blur around our monkey head. And the further that we go down, the more blurry it becomes. Let's try 5. Now the effect is becoming more extreme. And you may notice that our blurry spots are kind of stippled. And this is because we have preview enabled, which gives us a faster, lower quality version of defocus. So let's disable that, and now the blur is very clean. Sometimes I like to enable this gamma correction because it kind of makes our blurred highlights pop a bit more. And that's the basics of adding depth of field in the compositor.